The 2025 Italian Grand Prix. After last week's banger, we arrive at Italy for the second time, specifically at Monza, a brilliant track with the best fans you'll ever see, mostly. With ludicrously high average speeds and home to both the single fastest Formula 1 lap in history and the Petronas ISIS Formula 1 team's Kimi Antonelli. It's also been on the calendar since the sport's inception, which means it bore witness to some absolutely horrific deaths. But also some spectacular races like 2011 or 2021 where Italian juices got absolutely annihilated. There was a close title fight that ended in tears, which allowed McLaren to win with E1-2, which is something we almost never see in modern Formula 1 anymore. Oh boy. This is not to mention 2020, where Vettel's brakes failed, Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly won in an AlphaTauri. And of course 2024, where Piastri started styling on Lando and Ferrari gambled all their aura on a set of hards in front of their fans and won big. But most importantly of all, is the Tifosi's home race, where they're willing to sell their soul if it meant they could win, which translates to 50,000 upgrades and turning up the engine till it... But hey, they at least look good while doing it, because we always get treated to some gas one-off liveries every year, and 2025 is thankfully no different, with this gorgeous tribute to Niki Lauda, which HP somehow managed to stop themselves from ruining. But naturally, we also had new race suits to go with this banger, because we all know that winning the championship is temporary, whilst drip and a double DNF is eternal. In the past few videos, I talked about Red Bull's driver situation, which has now gotten even more complicated, because this man can't stop cooking, or whilst this one apparently doesn't know how to turn on the stove, and the other is secretly an ISIS reserve driver. I bring this up because it was revealed that there's just 5 races left before a decision will be made in Mexico, as no one at Red Bull has a contract apart from Max, which means someone is probably gonna get dropped. And I wonder who that might be. But honestly, all I'm hoping and praying for is that Hajar doesn't get demoted, and I think most people are doing the same at this point.
I said if you get called up by Red Bull, you say no.
But even then, I think he's still not gonna listen. But speaking of driver lineups, John Deere have signed Pierre for 3 more seasons, and Cadillac, who recently signed these 2 GOATs, also got Colton Herta as a test driver, because that's the best they could do thanks to the Mafia Super License restrictions, which he will be trying to finally clear by joining the F2 grid. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised anymore with these goofballs, when Stefano Domenicali, F1's president, that has said that Formula 1 races should be shorter because kids have the attention span of a goldfish, and that highlights are more popular than full races. Like, yeah, dumbass, no shit, highlights are more popular, it's almost like they're fucking free. But anyways, let's just get into this weekend. During the first practice session, Alex Dunn, who cooked last time out in Austria, replaced Oscar Piastri, as McLaren have installed all new power units in both cars. Paul Aaron also replaced Colapinto instead of Hulk, unlike last time. At the start of the session, everyone came out early, with Hamilton, who will take a 5-place grid penalty for blasting past double yellows like he's on a mission to annihilate a Marshall last week, went fastest. Leclerc locked up and cut the chicken, and so did Nico. Once everyone completed their first lap, Lando edged Max by just 0.005 of a second, and Liam Lawson dipped a wheel in the gravel, as did Alex Albon. As more laps were completed, McLaren weren't quickest for once, with Albon's Williams coming alive, whilst the other one was busy blocking Pierre Gasly twice. Paul Aaron touched grass and spun into the chicane, whilst Isaac missed it entirely, landing him a black and white flag. The teams then bolted on some softs, and my GOAT was able to go quickest, with Norris dropping a wheel into the gravel on both attempts. Kimi, Alonso and Isaac then nearly crashed into the Ascari chicane, throwing a ton of gravel into the track and bringing out the first red flag of the weekend. After the restart, Taliban locked up in turn 1, and the Ferrari upgrades were going ballistic, with Behrman completely impeding Dunn, then locking up as yet another Merc power unit unalived itself, bringing an end to the session with this finishing order, as McLaren suspiciously had no pace. In FP2, Piastri was back and immediately had a broken mirror, as his teammate lost his a few minutes later. Gasly cut the Ascari chicane, just like Charles Leclerc, as Lewis Hamilton nearly hit Alex Albon out of turn 2. Kimi Taliban-Tonelli then lost the car, wrong footage. Lost the car and then got beached at Lesmo 2, bringing the second red flag of the weekend. During which we got the most generic advice humanly possible from Lewis Hamilton, one that he should probably apply to himself, considering
I'm useless.
After the restart, the 2 McLarens were immediately back where they belong, as Piastri went into the gravel, as did Gabriel Bortolato, who damaged his floor in the process. Yeah, bro should have definitely locked in the simulator instead of playing COD with Max on Thursday. Alex Albon then almost lost it out of Lesmo 1, whilst Norris did the same out of the chicane. After the soft runs, the gap between P1 and P3 was less than a tenth. But in the end, this was the final order. Free practice 3 had a slow start, but once teams left the garage, Hamilton locked up and went off, as did Piastri, Ole Behrman and Carlos Sainz, with Verstappen managing to go fastest, followed by the two Ferraris, as Hadjar cut the chicane once again, getting another black and white flag. Towards the end, as teams were doing quali sims, the inevitable happened. But after a small beef between Max and Ocon and some more gravel being kicked up, the session ended in this order. With practice out of the way, it's time to set the grid. Q1 started and the teams immediately came out of their garages. Mercedes thought it was still 2020 and went out on mediums, as Ferrari went 1-2 to fit into the delusion, only for it to be instantly crushed by you-know-who, as Alonso came alive with Max and Sainz both going wide on their first runs and Albon taken to the escape road. In the second runs, Lawson and Isaac bottled it and were out, as Russell went through on mediums, followed by Max and Lando, with Stroll and both John Deeres being eliminated. Q2 was slightly delayed because of gravel, but once it got underway, Albon and Lando made a mistake as Max went fastest, followed by George and Oscar. In the second runs, Kimi set a great lap, which put him in P2 behind Max, as both Williams were unable to improve despite their practice pace, with Gabi beating Nico once more. In Q3, Ferrari came out of nowhere as Verstappen went quickest once again by just 84 thousandths. In the final runs, Leclerc and Hamilton bottled it, with both McLarens going quicker, but it was McGoat who managed to get pole against all odds by just 77 thousandths. With everything now said and done, it's time to go racing, as Hülkenberg retired before the race even began and Hadjar started in the pit lane. The lights were then out, with Norris getting a generational start and going into the grass as Verstappen cut the corner, whilst Antonelli dropped 4 places. Leclerc then overtook Piastri for P3 and had to defend for his life to keep him behind, even cutting turn 1 at one point, but ultimately lost the position. Max then gave the position back to Norris, with Hamilton being on fire and making a ton of overtakes. Ocon then pushed Stroll off into the grass in characteristic fashion, landing him a 5-second penalty. A few laps later, Max managed to get back past Norris and started to pull away. The TV direction learned their lesson and started showing the irrelevant people on the mini box instead of on full blast, which means we're thankfully one step away from finally getting rid of them entirely. Or maybe not. At the pit stop phase, Sauber dropped the ball and allowed Alonso to overtake in the pit, but unfortunately a few laps later his suspension headed out as Lawson struck again when overtaking Yuki. But it was Leclerc who came in first of the leaders for some fresh hards, with Max doing the same a few laps later, followed by Lewis. Behrman and Sainz then crashed to make their weekend even more miserable, as Kimi pushed Albon off the track and got a penalty, ruining his home weekend in the process. 7 laps from the end, Piastri finally came in for softs, followed by Lando a lap later, as McLaren bottled his stop and allowed Oscar to go through. The team then asked Piastri to let Lando back past, which he oddly did, but I personally think he shouldn't have, because it wasn't his fault and they are fighting for a championship after all. But in the end, Verstappen won the race by a landslide after a fantastic drive to take possibly the ugliest trophy in history. Albon also had a great race, going from 14th to 7th, and so did Hadjar, who somehow got points. And wow, what a race that was! In the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari gained the points they lost last week to Mercedes, whilst in the Drivers, Norris gets ever so slightly closer to Oscar after a repeat of Hungary 2024, which might come back to haunt him thanks to how close these two are with this rocket ship this year. But if you'd like to learn more about the fastest cars in F1 history, click the video on screen right now, and see ya!